So what if our biggest, most divisive national arguments, what if they weren't settled on cable news, but on a stage, through a play? I know it sounds wild, but that's exactly what happened in ancient Greece. We're going to dive into how the theater, of all things, became the very heart of their democracy.
Just try to picture it for a second. A place where drama isn't just, a fun night out. It's a public forum. It's where the biggest questions, we're talking justice, law, morality, were debated, but not by politicians. They were debated by playwrights. And that place? It was real. It was ancient Athens.
Yeah, this is how Athens thought out loud. For them, the theater was, well, it was kind of like the city's collective consciousness. It was where they worked through their deepest anxieties and their highest ideals. It was this huge civic and religious event where basically the entire community would get together to think together.
And here's the part that's really wild. Going to the theater, it wasn't just for fun. It was considered a civic duty, a responsibility. These plays were a core part of religious festivals, and they were literally how Athens held a mirror up to itself to ask those huge questions. Who are we? What do we actually believe?
So the stage wasn't just a stage. It was doing a bunch of crucial things all at once. It was like a laboratory, right, where they could experiment with ideas about justice and revenge. And it was also kind of like a courtroom, where they debate the laws of the state versus the laws of the gods. And oh yeah, they used comedy to just relentlessly mock powerful politicians. So you see, it all comes back to this one idea. Drama was how the city of Athens literally thought out loud.
All right, so let's jump into our first case study, if you will. This one comes from the playwright Aeschylus, and trust me, it plunges you right into this brutal, vicious cycle of revenge that forces the audience to ask, what even is justice?
So get this for a plot. The setup is just horrific. You've got this victorious king, Agamemnon, coming home from the Trojan War. But to win that war, he did something unforgivable. He sacrificed his own daughter. And his wife? Oh, she's been waiting for 10 years. She murders him in his own bathtub. So, is that justice, or is it just another monstrous crime? Aeschylus doesn't give you an easy answer. He throws this impossible question right at the audience, forcing the entire city to wrestle with that blurry, bloody line between justice and pure vengeance.
And the way Aeschylus builds the tension is just brilliant. He doesn't open the play with the king or queen. Nope. He starts with a lowly watchman, just some tired soldier on a rooftop. And it's this ordinary guy who carries the moral weight of the whole story. It immediately gives you this sense that, yeah, the decisions made by the people in charge, they have massive consequences for everyone, all the way down.
Okay, so that's justice and vengeance. Let's move to our next case, which takes things a step further. We're going from a question of personal revenge to a head-on collision between the laws of man and the laws of the gods. And for that, we turn to Sophocles' masterpiece, Antigone.
And the central conflict here is it's perfectly balanced and completely impossible to solve. On one side, you have King Creon. He declares Antigone's brother a traitor and says no one is allowed to bury him, period. For Creon, the law of the state is supreme. But for Antigone, his sister, leaving her brother unburied is a sin. It violates a sacred, divine law that's way more important than any king's decree. Neither one will back down. And that, right there, that's the heart of the tragedy.
And this is where Antigone makes her powerful defense. She basically says to the king, "Who are you, a mortal man, to override the unwritten, unshakable laws of heaven?" Now really think about that for a second. This is Sophocles, a guy with no Bible, no special text from a god, and he's arguing that there's a universal moral law that's higher than any human law. It's an absolutely huge idea, and it would echo for centuries.
So this whole debate, human authority versus a higher moral law, the exact thing they were exploring on stage, well, it didn't stay on the stage. It spilled out into the real world, into the streets and the courtrooms, and it all came to a head in the actual, real-life trial of Athens' greatest philosophical troublemaker, Socrates.
Now, it's super important to remember, Socrates himself never wrote a single thing down. Everything we know about him, we know through his students, mostly Plato. So what we're looking at here is Plato's account of his mentor's trial, a trial where Socrates was literally fighting for his life.
And who was the judge? Well, it wasn't one person. It was a jury of 501 of his fellow citizens. I mean, this was no secret trial. It was a massive public event in the world's very first democracy. You could say the city itself was putting philosophy on trial.
And the verdict, look at how close this was. 280 voted to convict him.
221 voted to acquit. That's a difference of less than 60 votes. Athens was that close to a different outcome. It's a stark reminder, right? Democracy doesn't automatically guarantee wisdom. In the end, the city executed its most brilliant mind, all because he asked too many uncomfortable questions.
And this was at the heart of his defense. He didn't beg for his life. Instead, Socrates basically argued that his whole mission, constantly questioning himself and everyone else about what's true and what's good, was the best thing he could possibly do for Athens. He famously said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." For him, a life without that kind of tough self-reflection was literally worthless.
And in his final, defiant statement, it's like he's channeling Antigone. He tells the jury, "I will obey God rather than you." He's saying he has to follow a higher calling, a divine command, not their human verdict. He would rather die than give up his philosophical mission.
So, okay, why are we still talking about these stories 2,500 years later? It's simple, really. The questions they raise, they have never, ever gone away.
I mean, think about it. This clash between what the state demands and what your own conscience tells you to do, is that just some dusty old problem? Absolutely not. It is one of the most timeless and persistent dilemmas in all of human history.
And you can see this powerful echo through time, right? You start with Antigone questioning a king's decree back in ancient Greece. Fast forward to 1535, you have Thomas More being executed because he refused to put his king's law above his conscience. Fast forward again to 1945, Dietrich Bonhoeffer is executed for resisting a state he believed was evil. It's the exact same principle. Each of them chose conscience over compliance.
And that's what's so incredible when you stop and think about it. In a pagan world, a world without the religious or ethical rulebooks we have today, these Greek thinkers landed on these profound moral truths: that pride will destroy you, that there are laws higher than human laws, and that taking care of your soul is more important than taking care of your body. These are huge ideas.
Which brings us right back to us, to the final and maybe most personal question. Socrates died for this idea that we have to think carefully about our lives, about what is true and what is good. He was sentenced to death, but he left behind a challenge that outlived his executioners and even outlived his city. And that challenge speaks directly to you and me right now. In our modern age of constant noise and endless distraction, are you living an examined life?